Hey guys, I'm gonna get right into this video. I'm gonna apologize in advance if my voice gets kind of raspy near the end. You guys know I lost it a couple weeks ago, and this is like the third or fourth video I've filmed today, so it's starting to get a little worn out. Anyway, getting into the video, this is obviously a review slash discussion of A Clash of Kings. It's all spoilers. There's really nothing I can say that's not a spoiler. So if you haven't read Game of Thrones, which is the first book in this series, I would suggest that you read that first, read this first, and then come back and watch. If you've already read the whole series like me, then come join. Let's talk about this book. Let's talk about all the reasons why I dropped it from a 5-star, because I thought that's what it was in my mind, to like a 3-star, because just was not my favorite book in the series. I can't remember exactly the format that I did for the first book, and so this one might be completely different. You guys know I can't be bothered to write notes, so this is all just on the fly. This is literally just whatever comes out of my mind. And just to let you know, it's been a few weeks since I read this, so I'm gonna do my best. I think what I did in the first book was I kind of just went through all the characters and told you like where I was sitting with like whether I liked them or not. So I'm gonna kind of just start there again. If you see me looking down, it's because all my handy dandy notes are in the back. If you want to see how I annotate my books or why I annotate my books, I will put a card up here. Getting into here. So for the characters, Cresden is the first person I have written down, and I don't think he ever showed up again. He might be dead. I don't remember. He's clearly not memorable and not important. Clearly I was writing down like every character at the beginning. Moving on to Stannis. Stannis, again, he's a blah character. I like Davos, and I know this is kind of like, they're kind of joined, because you don't get Stannis's perspective, which is kind of interesting. He's a character I don't care about. He's a huge character in the book, but we never, that I can think of, get anything from his direct perspective, I don't think, in this book. Possibly in future ones, but not in this one. In this one, we only know about Stannis through what other characters know, and especially Davos, because Davos is like his right-hand fingerless man. So Stannis, like, I don't like him. I never came to like him. I never liked him in the show. I don't like him. So Stannis is just an incredibly boring character. He's really moody. He's really just, like, he's just peevish. Like, he drives me crazy. He thinks he deserves all this stuff, and not even because he wants to, like, make the realm better. He just wants to be powerful because he didn't get to be the first time. And he's just annoying, and I don't like him, and I can't believe he gets as far as he does. Okay, so after Stavos? Is that their celebrity name? Okay, so after Stannis, I have Pylos and Shireen, which don't really matter. Sometimes I just write people down so I remember how old they are and who they belong to, yada yada yada. So the next one is Sir Davos. So it was a great segue, because really we only get Stannis' perspective from Davos, and I like Davos. I think he's pretty nice guy. I don't mind following his story. That being said, he's not incredibly interesting. I think he's very wise. I think he gives good counsel, and I always like want the best for him. I do really like Davos. I just feel like he's only important because we need to know about Stannis, which makes sense. But I do, like I said, I like Davos. There's never come a time where I didn't like him that I can think of, and I feel like he's genuinely a pretty like kind character, and he just wants things to be fair, and he's very grounded and he's very humble because he started out as a smuggler and has like gone up in the ranks, and so people don't always respect him, but I feel like he's a really, really good guy. So next I have Renly, who obviously isn't a big deal either because his character is only there so that it can die. And then the next we have Melisandre, who I also hate. I can't stand the Red Woman. She's creepy and I don't like her, and she's really annoying, and she bothers me. I wish she didn't exist. I hate what she stands for. She does really despicable things and I just don't like her. That being said, she's a good bad guy because she's kind of manipulative, and not to spoil anything for like the whole series if you haven't read like subsequent books yet, but I'm always really confused, more so from the show, as to how the different like religions and stuff come into play, like how there's so many different things and what they were trying to do with that, because I feel like there was a lot of loose ends at the end of the show that I'm hoping somehow get wrapped up in the series. So anyway, yeah, Melisandre, don't like her. Feel like she's a good bad guy though. It's good that she's in there because she's a character to hate, but I don't like her. And then we have Bran, and Bran is actually kind of interesting because I think if you watched the first one, and I don't remember if I was starting to like Bran more in my Game of Thrones book talk because it's literally been a year or something since I put that one up. Bran has really grown on me in this book, and I feel like even in the first one. The first time I read through the series, I feel like I thought he was a very insignificant character. I wasn't picking things out the way that I am now on a reread for like further things. And I thought he was such kind of a blasé character, and he was very like, and I just didn't care about him. And I thought that all of his scenes were kind of boring. And this is what's really interesting about a reread, because I find his chapters to be incredibly interesting on a second read because they always tend to have a lot of foreshadowing, or at least I think they do. I've been picking out things where I'm like, man, I did not notice that the first time I was reading this, but that's important, or that is with this. And it's like, how did you like do this where you knew where it was going? Like to me, it's mind-boggling how these little nuggets and Easter eggs have kind of been left in there. So I actually, like the first read, I didn't really care about Bran and I didn't really like him that much. And the second time around, I'm really enjoying his character, which is kind of new and fresh and interesting because things are changing. The next one is Joffrey. Honestly, is there anyone out there who does like Joffrey? He is such a little brat and he's such an asshole, and Joffrey he just turns me into fire, like bad fire, like ragey fire. I just can't stand him, but he is the perfect villain. He is done so well because he is so hateable, like, and it feels so good to hate his character, and you just want the worst things in the world possible to come down on him. Joffrey is the worst, but he is such a good villain. Next we have Theon, another character who I can't stand. I didn't like him in the first one, and I don't like him in the second one. I think he's whiny, and he's pretentious, and he thinks he deserves all these things, and he could have lived a perfectly fine life, and his family is shitty. Like, his family is the worst, and he thinks he was held captive and treated so poorly and not like one of the family, but he was treated so much better with the Starks than he ever would have been in his own family. And he never would have gotten the throne in his own family anyway, likely. And he's such a whiny little beesh. And I just can't. I just can't. I feel like in later books, I don't want to say anything again in case anybody hasn't read the later books, I don't hate him so much in the later books, and I feel a little bit bad for him, but not as bad as I could have because I just loathed him so much at the beginning, and I never trusted him, and I still like him. Next we have Arya, and as far as this book goes, I wasn't sure exactly when, because there was a time when in the first read where her character kind of lost for me. Like, I stopped loving her as much as I had in the beginning because she gets really, really hateful at some point, and I can't remember exactly where that starts happening. I thought it was going to start happening in this book, and maybe I'll feel differently second time around, but I still really enjoy her character. I think she is pretty kick-ass. She works really hard. She is very good at just like getting things done and surviving and getting through things, and she's a very, very strong character, and I really like that about her, and I'm hoping that I continue to like her and I don't get like put off by her partway through like I did last time. But I do, as of this book, still really, really enjoy her character. Dany, this I feel like is kind of an unpopular opinion, and I keep saying this, I don't remember what I said in the first video, which is good that I did it because I can always go back and look. But Dany has never been a character that I loved. She's never been one that I rooted for. I have never wanted her to get Westeros. To me, I feel like if Dany just stayed where she is, she could blossom and be so much better. And I just, like, I always feel like she wants too much. Like, she just always wants more just because, sort of in the same way, like, Stannis thinks he deserves it, she thinks she deserves it. And, like, I feel like times kind of change, and she could be a really, really amazing person where she is without needing so much more. And I'm sure lots of people disagree. She's the Dragon Queen. Everyone loves her. I do like her. I feel like she could do amazing things in a different part of the world. That's what I think. The next character that I have here is Rob. Again, another character I really don't care about. I know that some people, he's like their little baby child, but Rob, to me, he feels like a kid who's trying to be an adult, but he feels like that. Like, he doesn't realize the gravity of things, and maybe he kind of does, I guess. With Rob, I just feel like he isn't as good at taking counsel. And that being said, a lot of his counsel is from Catelyn, who, granted, counseled Ned in book 1, and essentially was the cause of his demise, because she pushed him to go to be Robert's hand. But she definitely gave wiser counsel, I think, in book 2. That being said, and I'm gonna just cover Rob and Catelyn together because they are pretty intertwined, I don't really like either one of them. And I don't care about either one of them. And they're definitely one of the storylines that, like, I just don't care about going forward, and I couldn't care less about. I get that Catelyn's sad and I get all these things and I understand, but I don't feel for them like I do some of the other characters. Reading them, like, I'm just kind of like meh with both of them. I also realized there's a bunch of names that I forgot to write down, and I just wrote them down. That being said, if I'm missing anyone, or if you're like, what do you think of this person, then just comment down below and I will answer you, because again, off the top of my head, we'll see what I remember. The next person that I have on the list here is Sansa. And Sansa is another one who, in the beginning, I loathed her so much. So Sansa is a character who, in book 1, I couldn't stand her. I thought she was whiny. I thought she was annoying. That being said, she was like 12, and she kind of is the perfect 12-year-old. Like, she's the perfect character for what she played. It's just, I didn't like her, which was fine. I think you were meant kind of to not like her. And then as she gets older and learns more and gets more grown up and yada, 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 you start to kind of fall for her as she starts to realize the gravity of the situation. And I think that she goes from being this really, really vile, annoying little preteen to growing up and getting smart and realizing, like I said, the gravity of the situation, how bad it is, how much trouble she's in, all that. And then leading from Sansa into the Hound. The Hound is such a love-hate character, and he's never nice. Like, he's never openly wonderful, but in the scope of how Joffrey's, like, vermin treat her, the Hound, he's always, like, he eases up on it and he stops them from being especially cruel, and he tries to protect her in kind of a creepy way. And the first time that I read the book, when he asks her to, like, run away with him, I don't think I realized this, and I don't know if this is exactly what's being implied, but I'm assuming it is. The first time I read it, I was like, I remember thinking, Sansa, why are you so stupid? Go with him. And then the second time I read it, I was like, oh yeah, he was probably trying to get her to, like, be with him. Like, the Hound doesn't do anything without payment, so he probably wanted her to be, like, his wife or his woman or whatever, and not just, like, because the Hound's not just out of the goodness of his heart going to save someone's life without expecting anything in return. That's not really, like, his deal. The two of them, I really did, like, I had a soft spot for the Hound, and, like, 1 minute I'm like, you are so terrible, and then in the next minute I'm like,
but sometimes there's a glimmer of hope, and maybe you're like a nice person deep down in your withered soul.
And it's like, I can't 100% hate him. Like, Joff, no redeeming qualities. The Hound, sometimes you get this glimpse of, like, not terrible, and it just, like, makes you want to pull that string and see what happens, even though he's kind of terrible. And then next we have my favorite, Tyrion. Tyrion will always be my favorite character. I love Tyrion and I love Jon, but Tyrion will always be my favorite character. He is so witty, and he's so funny and quippy, and I just think he's such an interesting person. And he's flawed. I'm not saying he's perfect. He's definitely flawed. Like, when he slaps what's her face, who I can't remember her name right now. When he slaps her, like, I remember being so appalled, and I forgot that that happened. And then, like, I can't think of much else that he's done besides that particular thing. But it made me really sad that he did that because I love him as a character so much, and like that was definitely like a dark point in the book. But again, he is flawed just like everybody else, so it kind of brought him back down off the pedestal just a little bit. And then I don't think there's many scenes with him and John specifically in this book. I loved all the scenes with the two of them from book 1. I don't remember exactly specific scenes from book 2, but I do love the two of them very much, and I love John. John is still one of my favorite. I'm gonna just move right on to him. This is the book where he meets Ygritte, and I love Ygritte. I am like, if any of you were to ask Jared how many times a week I say,
"You know nothing, Jon Snow,"
and like walk away, not in like a mean, abusive, I'm horrible wife kind of way, but like that's like a running joke that I just constantly am like, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." I always say it because I just love the two of them. So this is the book where we get to meet Ygritte, and I just love following John's story. I love John so much. I don't think I'll ever not love John. He is like, some people think that Rob is their sweet baby child. Well, John is my sweet baby child. I just love him so much. Varys is another character who I hated the first time I read the book, and then after seeing the show and rereading, I think Varys is kind of a great character. He's very underrated, and he is kind of, see, the thing is, he's not really even slimy, because he says right out, he doesn't serve any one particular person, he serves the realm. And so he's actually a very political or politically driven person, where he is literally trying to do the best he thinks is, he's literally trying to do what he thinks is the best for the realm or for the people as a whole, not just the people in the palace, which I find is a really, really interesting thing. And I'm actually finding myself loving Varys, or the relationship between Varys and Tyrion as well. But I think that Varys is kind of an underrated character, and I don't really, like, I haven't watched enough videos on here to know how people feel about him, but I know that I thought he was kind of a slimy snake. And then the more I read about him, he's very loyal. He's just loyal to his morals, even if they aren't morally right for like everyone in the book, which I find is really interesting, and I really enjoy Varys' character now that I don't like loathe him like I did the first time I was reading the books. And then the last couple characters I have are Jaime and Brienne. I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head. Jaime is still one that I dislike in this book, but there is like a little glimmer of the change that he kind of goes through at the end of the book when him and Catelyn are talking, and I really, really liked that conversation. He obviously still says terrible things, but I love where it's going to end up going, because I know where it's going. And then I really like Brienne's character. I feel like in this book she's still very underrated. She doesn't really get a lot of time. You don't get anything like from her perspective, and you don't really know a lot about her, but I know what's going to happen, and Brienne is a character that I really, really enjoy reading about. So those are all the characters that I can think of. Oh, Podrick. I forgot to talk about Pod. I was talking about this with someone on Instagram. Pod is an underrated character, for sure. I love Podrick. I think he's so good, and I wish that we got more. Like, I wish we knew more about him. I just feel like he's so loyal, and especially how loyal he is, and when he saves Tyrion, and oh man, I really have a soft spot for Pod. I know we don't know a lot about him, but I feel like he's kind of an underrated character, because he's actually pretty important when you think about like the fact that he saved Tyrion. Alright, so this next part of the video, if you made it this far and through all of my character wrap-ups, we'll start getting into some of the quotes and things that I found, or like thoughts that I had. There's a lot of tabs. For a book that I didn't love as much as the rest, there's certainly a lot of tabs, like, which is kind of funny. So even in the prologue, it's kind of interesting, and again, if you haven't read the book, I'm not going to say why this is important, but I think that anybody who's read further books will know what I'm getting to. And so Cresson is talking about this stone, or like what looks like a stone. Cresson no longer recalled the name the Asahi gave the leaf, or the Lysine prisoners the crystal. In the Citadel, it was simply called the Strangler. Dissolved in wine, it would make the muscles of a man's throat clenched tighter than any fist, shutting off his windpipe, and they said a victim's face turned as purple as the little seed from which his death was grown. But so too did a man choking on a morsel of food. And so if you've read further books, in the prologue, like there is, I mean, not that it says what's gonna happen, but it's mentioned, and I never caught that the first time, and then I was like reading it, and I'm like, what? It's right there! Like, it's so interesting. So jumping quickly back to Tyrion and Varys as I'm going through here, I'm just quickly going through the tabs, and this is kind of the part where I realized that Varys isn't such a bad person as I thought he was in the beginning. And he says, "You are the hand, I serve the realm, the king, and you." And so he's kind of saying like he always serves the realm first, and so that's why he's so shady and never really belongs to any one person, which I think is kind of interesting. And I love the banter between Tyrion and Varys. One of the quotes that I really liked was from Tyrion, and he said, "Crowns do queer things to the heads beneath them," which I feel like could kind of be foreshadowing, but also it's just discussing like the kings that have already come to pass. But definitely I feel like, to me anyway, that kind of feels like foreshadowing for the future, for events that like might still be coming. And then there's a part where Jon and Sam are talking, and Samwell Tarly is talking about how he never really felt safe at home, and obviously they're like out beyond the wall and he's terrified. And Jon says, "There's no shame in fear, my father told me. What matters most is how we face it," which I think is kind of just a neat quote. How you approach something is sort of like how much power that you give it over you, kind of a thing, if that makes sense. Moving on, I said, "Robb tries to be a good king, but he makes so many demands that he must know Cersei would never agree. I don't often like Catelyn, but she's been wise of late." And that was like kind of one of the qualms I had with Robb, is he had like unrealistic wants. And so obviously he was never going to get anyone freed because he had like unrealistic expectations, and therefore wasn't really being like a very diplomatic king, if you will. He was kind of just acting like a bratty boy, and he wanted more than he was obviously ever gonna get. Then I just said, I hate Theon, I hate the Greyjoys, because I was so mad. I'm literally always mad at Theon. Like, let's be real, I'm pretty much just always mad at Theon. Around page 200, I wrote down, "So far the story is feeling slower, but maybe that's just because I don't like Stannis or Theon." I really liked this quote on page 229 from Tyrion to Cersei, and he says, "When you tear out a man's tongue, you're not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say." I just think that Tyrion is always so wise, and I feel like he's very like quotable. 251, Ramsay Bolton is introduced. The servant's name is Reek. And I was really confused because on the reread, I could not freaking remember. Like, as I was reading, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that Reek ends up being Ramsay. But when he's first introduced, and like the character switch is kind of seamless, but when he shows up, I'm like, I kept thinking like there's marks throughout the book or like notes throughout the book where I've been like, is Reek actually him? Am I remembering correctly? Did I forget this? Like, I just completely blanked. And I feel like the first time I read it, I was really confused as well, which means he did a really good job. George R.R. Martin did a really good job of like confusing people, or at least confusing me. But I just was second guessing myself the whole time. And then finally I was like, okay, I knew that was him. I thought that was him. 322, I said, "Thankfully the story is picking up pace, getting much more enjoyable. So much is about to happen." And it did, and then it kind of slowed down again. 396, hate the Greyjoys. They're a nasty group. One thing I'm realizing though, is Bran's chapters are much more interesting this time around, especially if it goes in the direction that the show did, which I don't know. Like, I don't know if the books are going to end the same way that the show did. On one hand, I'm okay if they do, but on the other hand, I'm looking forward to seeing if they don't, because I feel like the ending could have been so much better. That's just how I feel about that. 492, Tyrion says to Sansa, "Sorcery is the sauce fools spoon over failure to hide the flavor of their own incompetence." I just think Tyrion is just so quotable. He's so wise. I just love his like character and like what, like everything that he says is just so him. Like, he's such a well-developed character. You'll notice most of my quotes are from Tyrion because I love him. 517, Jon finds the dragon glass in a fresh grave. Definitely foreshadowing. Love that part. Like, when I read that, I was like, wait, what? What? Oh, it's here. It's so early on. 577, story has picked up, but there are just so many characters I don't like or I'm not attached to. This definitely isn't anywhere near my favorite for this series. 40, it's definitely been slow going the last 100 pages or so. Sure, things happen. I've picked back up. And I'm interested, but I hate Theon. I couldn't care less about Robb or Catelyn, and while Dany is interesting, she's not a favorite. And then 754, I said I couldn't stand Sansa in book 1, but I've come to feel sad for her, and I hate that she's trapped in the castle. So this is really, like, this book is really the turning point for Sansa. I really, really enjoy her character now, and I feel like I like her pretty much throughout all the rest of the books. She's very much grown on me as a character, and very much has grown as a character. 767, John has a green dream or a wolf dream, and I always thought this was kind of weird because John definitely has like visions similar to what Bran has, but nobody ever calls him like a warg or like green seer or whatever they're called, and I don't know if his are just happening from like magical special circumstances, or if he also has like the same kind of ability as Bran but like isn't tapping into it. I'm always like curious as to like where this is, like what the point was for this. And then 860, I just said Pod, he's so overlooked but he's so loyal, and I got really excited. And then as far as like the big events in this book, Tyrion gets named Hand of the King, Robb makes demands as King of the North. Like, these are just like the big events that I wrote down. Theon is back at Pike, unloved as ever. Arya's band of Black Brothers is murdered, save for a few, which is, I forgot about that scene. That scene was so sad when they're in like the fortress and everybody pretty much dies. On page 260, Bran remembers Jaime and Cersei and how he fell. Big turning point. Myrcella is promised to Dorne, Stannis attacks Storm End, Pycelle is sent to the Black Cells after the shave of a lifetime, Ramsay Bolton seizes and marries Lady Hornwood and like steals her lands, Jojen and Bran talk of the Three-Eyed Crow, Renly is slain by the Shadow, Jon finds Dragonglass, Theon takes Winterfell, and Bran surrenders. Dany walks through the House of the Undying, which is also a really neat scene. I really enjoy reading that particular part where she's going through and they're like trying to trick her. I think that's a really, really like creepy scene, and it's really, really well done and very easy to like picture in my mind. Jon finds Ygritte. I love when Jon finds Ygritte. Oh, I love them. Sansa has flowered. Poor Sansa. Battle of the Blackwater. Arya escapes Harrenhal. Sansa no longer betrothed to Joffrey. And Dantas gives Sansa the hairnet, which foreshadowing that hairnet, I tell ya. Reek is actually Ramsay and he takes Winterfell from Theon. Jon turns cloak and kills the Hat Hand, which is a really, really sad scene. I hate that part, it's so sad. And the last thing that I wrote down is that Asha and Rickon leave, but the last time Theon is mentioned in books 1 to 5 is this one. So this is literally the last time we ever hear about Rickon, and I'm curious as to what other people think, because I know in the show that he dies, but in the books there is no evidence that he actually dies. And so reading the books, I'm constantly thinking like, is he gonna pop up somewhere? He'd still be quite young, but is he gonna pop up at some point and like be a huge plot twist? Or did George R.R. Martin just like send him off with Asha and he's disappeared and now we'll never see him again and he's just gonna be like a loose end that we never get anything else out of? Man, this video was long. My apologies, but not really, because you guys know I'm long-winded. It's a book talk, and I get to chat as long as I want about the book, and poor you just has to watch along, and I hope that you enjoy it. If you've read this book, definitely comment down below, start a discussion. What are your favorite parts in the book, your least favorite? What character do you love? What character do you hate? Just down there, just flood me with your comments of what you think of book 2 in Game of Thrones. I am very much looking forward to seeing what other people think. I feel like after rereading this, it's largely people's least favorite of the book, but least favorite of the series. But I'm looking forward to see if anyone thought that this book was like absolutely incredible, if it's anybody's favorite. Are you like one of the ones who really, really loves the people in this book? Like, I'd be very, very curious to hear from you. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and the bell so you don't miss future notifications. I do upload most Mondays and Thursdays, and I will talk to you guys all in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.